Chosen one, listen to me carefully. What I'm about to share is urgent, and it is not for everyone. This message is only for those who truly walk the divine path of God. If someone does not seek truth, if someone mocks faith, if someone resists God's voice, this message will not hold them. But if you are still here, it's because you were meant to hear this. This message has reached you at the exact moment your spirit was ready. Not early, not late, perfectly on time. There are things you were never told, not because you were unworthy, but because darkness worked very hard to keep you unaware. The devil himself wanted you confused, distracted, and doubting yourself. He wanted you walking in the dark while carrying light. But that season is ending. Today, it's time you know what was hidden from you and why it was hidden. If you've ever felt that your life made no sense until now, stay with me. If you've sensed that something powerful was delayed, not denied, stay till the end. What you'll understand today will shift how you see your past, your battles, and your calling. Before we continue, chosen ones, give a like to this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, turn on the bell icon, share this message with other chosen ones, and comment 777 to declare that you are aligned with God's divine timing and truth. The truth about the darkness you grew up in. Chosen one, I want you to breathe for a moment and really hear this. The darkness you grew up in was not a mistake. It was not random, and it was not proof that God abandoned you. In fact, it was evidence that your life carried weight long before you understood it. Most people never question their surroundings. They blend in, they adapt. You didn't, and that alone already tells me something about you. You were surrounded by confusion early on, not always dramatic darkness, but subtle things, misunderstandings, emotional neglect, being unseen, being misunderstood even when you spoke clearly. You tried to do the right thing, yet life felt heavier for you than for others. You watched people take shortcuts and succeed while you struggled just to stay grounded. And many times you wondered quietly, why does it feel like I'm walking against the wind? Let me say this plainly. The darkness around you was not there to destroy you. It was there to shape your discernment. Light that has never known darkness is fragile, but light that learns to breathe in the dark becomes unshakable. God allows certain environments not because He approves of them, but because He knows what they will produce inside you. The enemy never wastes energy on empty vessels. He doesn't spend time confusing those who carry no future threat. He targets potential. He targets sensitivity. He targets those whose spirit can hear God even before their mind understands Him. That is why confusion followed you early. That is why clarity always seemed delayed. Not because you were behind, but because you were being preserved. You see, chosen one, awareness changes everything. The moment you understand who you are, your decisions shift, your boundaries strengthen, your obedience deepens, and the enemy knows this. So the goal was never to destroy you outright. The goal was to delay your awareness, to keep you busy surviving so you wouldn't start discerning. That's why so much of your early life felt like emotional fog. You weren't blind, you were restrained. And there is a difference. Blindness has no capacity to see. Restraint is temporary. God places restraints when revealing too much too early would overwhelm you or expose you before you're fortified. Think about it. Would a child be handed the weight of adult responsibility? No. Timing matters in the kingdom. You were sensitive in a world that rewarded numbness. You felt deeply in an environment that mocked emotion. You questioned things others accepted without thought. And instead of being guided, you were often silenced. Labeled too intense, too quiet, too different. But that difference wasn't weakness. It was awareness trying to awaken. Many chosen ones grow up believing something is wrong with them. They internalize the chaos around them and assume it must be their fault. Let me free you from that lie right now. You were not broken. You are unfinished. And there is a holy difference between the two. Broken things decay. Unfinished things are still under construction. God does not rush construction. He layers it. He reinforces foundations where no one can see. While others were learning how to impress the world, you were learning how to survive storms. While others were developing confidence from applause, you were developing endurance in silence. And though it didn't feel fair, it was necessary. I want you to understand this clearly. The darkness you faced was not punishment. It was protection in disguise. If you had been given clarity too soon, you might have trusted the wrong voices. If you had stepped into influence too early, pride or fear could have distorted your assignment. So God allowed delay. He allowed obscurity. He allowed misunderstanding, not to harm you, but to humble you and refine you. That's why even in your lowest moments, something always kept you from crossing certain lines. You may not have known why you couldn't fully conform, why certain sins never satisfied you, why certain paths never felt right. That was divine restraint. God was guarding what was in you, even when you didn't know how to guard it yourself. And here is something most people never realize. Darkness reveals character faster than comfort ever will. When life is easy, everyone looks faithful. But when life is confusing, when prayers seem unanswered, when clarity is withheld, that's when true alignment shows itself. And you stayed. You questioned, yes. You struggled, absolutely. But you never fully walked away. That matters. The enemy tried to convince you that your confusion meant disqualification, but God was using that same confusion to deepen your reliance on Him rather than on certainty. You learned how to listen internally instead of depending only on external validation. That skill alone sets you apart. Chosen one, your past wasn't chaotic. It was calibrated. Every delay was measured. Every silence had a purpose. Every closed door saved you from a future that didn't align with your calling. And every unanswered question strengthened your capacity to hear God when the time finally came. Now listen closely. The fact that you are understanding this now means the season of restraint is lifting. God does not reveal truth without intention. When awareness comes, responsibility follows, and you are not receiving this understanding by accident. You are receiving it because your spirit is ready to carry it without being consumed by it. You are no longer the confused version of yourself. You are the aware version emerging. And that is exactly why the darkness you grew up in no longer has authority over you. It served its purpose. It trained you. It sharpened you. And now it must release you. This is not the story of how you were almost destroyed. This is the story of how you were quietly prepared. And in the next part, I'm going to tell you something most people are never told. Why the enemy didn't just want you confused, but why he was genuinely threatened by the moment you would finally understand who you are. Why the devil feared your awareness. Chosen one, I want you to understand something very clearly now, without fear and without exaggeration. The devil was never intimidated by your noise. He was threatened by your potential awareness. Darkness does not fear loud people. Darkness fears awake people. And from the very beginning, there was something about you that could not be fully silenced, only delayed. The enemy studies patterns. He observes tendencies. He recognizes spiritual signatures long before humans recognize calling. Long before you ever questioned your life, long before you searched for meaning, the enemy already knew you carried discernment. Not talent alone, discernment. And discernment is dangerous to darkness because it exposes without needing permission. You see, chosen one, the devil does not create. He imitates. He reacts. He responds to what God has already placed. So when something divine is planted in a person, the enemy's role becomes strategic, not impulsive. He doesn't rush destruction. He prefers delay. He prefers distraction. He prefers keeping you functional but unaware. Awareness is activation. And once you become aware, you no longer move blindly. You question motives. You sense deception. You stop explaining yourself to the wrong people. You stop seeking validation where God never assigned it. And that shift alone collapses many of the enemy's plans. That is why your life was filled with near misses, close calls, moments where things almost went wrong but didn't, situations that should have broken you but somehow didn't. This wasn't luck. This was containment. God allowed pressure but restricted collapse. Because even before you knew who you were, heaven already knew what would happen when you did. The devil doesn't fear believers who quote scripture without understanding. He fears believers who live scripture quietly with authority. He fears those who don't need constant applause to obey God. He fears those who can sit in silence without losing faith. And that was you, long before you had language for it. Think about how often distraction tried to pull you away. Not always obvious sin. Sometimes just noise, emotional chaos, unnecessary responsibilities, constant urgency. Always something demanding your attention. Because if the enemy could keep you busy enough, tired enough, emotionally drained enough, you wouldn't have the stillness required to hear God clearly. And yet, even in that noise, you still sensed something deeper. You felt uncomfortable in shallow conversations. You felt drained around manipulation. You felt unsettled by dishonesty, even when it benefited you. That wasn't moral superiority, that was spiritual alignment asserting itself before you understood it. The enemy understood something you didn't at the time. Once awareness arrives, fear loses leverage. Guilt loses control. Shame stops working. Because you no longer internalize attacks as identity. You recognize them as interference. And when that happens, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding spiritually. That's why the devil worked so hard to keep you doubting yourself. Not doubting God, doubting you. If he could make you question your worth, your sanity, your discernment, he could delay your confidence without ever revealing himself. Self-doubt is quieter than fear, but far more effective. Chosen one, you were not meant to be controlled. You were meant to be guided, and guidance requires trust. The enemy cannot guide you, so he tries to confuse you instead. But confusion only works when you believe it belongs to you. Once you realize confusion was external pressure, not internal truth, it loses its grip. Notice this pattern. Whenever you were close to clarity, something interrupted. A distraction, an emotional trigger, a setback, a delay. Not because God changed his mind, but because awareness was approaching, and awareness terrifies darkness because it cannot be reversed. The devil is not omniscient. He does not know everything, but he is experienced, and experience has taught him one thing. Once a chosen one sees clearly, the war shifts. It is no longer about control. It becomes about damage limitation. Because awakened believers don't need permission to obey God. They move quietly, decisively, and that unsettles the systems built on deception. You were never meant to blend in, and the enemy knew that. That's why he tried to convince you that being different was a flaw, that your sensitivity was weakness, that your questioning nature was rebellion, that your discomfort was instability. But in truth, those were early signs of discernment forming under pressure. Let me be very clear with you now. The devil feared the day you would stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What was trying to stop me?" That shift changes everything. Because once you stop turning inward in accusation and start looking outward in discernment, the fog lifts. Your awareness does not make you arrogant. It makes you responsible. And responsibility is something darkness cannot manage. Darkness thrives in chaos. Awareness introduces order. It slows reaction. It sharpens choice. And when you choose intentionally, manipulation loses access. That's why peace always visited you right before breakthrough. That wasn't coincidence. Peace is the atmosphere where God speaks most clearly. And the enemy hates peace because it cannot operate in it. So he tried to rush you, pressure you, make you feel late, make you feel behind. Because urgency creates panic, and panic blocks discernment. But even then, Something in you resisted rushing. You hesitated when others ran. You waited when others forced outcomes. And though it cost you time, it saved you from misalignment. The enemy couldn't understand why you didn't self-destruct under pressure, but heaven knew exactly why. Chosen one, your awareness is not about power over others, it is about authority over yourself. And self-governed believers are the most dangerous to darkness. They don't need control. They don't seek domination. They simply obey God, quietly, consistently, and that dismantles systems built on fear. The devil feared your awareness because once you see clearly, you stop feeding what was feeding on you. You stop engaging in unnecessary battles. You stop entertaining manipulation. You stop explaining your obedience to those who cannot understand it. And in that silence, your authority grows. Now listen carefully. Awareness has arrived because you can handle it. God does not reveal truth prematurely. He reveals it precisely. You are no longer the version of yourself that would misuse it, fear it, or idolize it. You are grounded enough now to carry clarity without becoming consumed by it. And that is why the enemy's grip is weakening. Not because you fought harder, but because you finally see clearly. In the next part, I'm going to show you the quiet signs that proved you were never meant to stay asleep. Signs you may have dismissed, but heaven never did. The signs you were never meant to stay asleep. Chosen one, now I want you to listen gently, without forcing meaning or trying to prove anything. What I'm about to share is not meant to inflate your ego. It is meant to settle your spirit. Because the signs that marked you were never loud, dramatic, or theatrical. They were quiet, consistent, personal, and that's why many people miss them. One of the earliest signs was your discomfort with what everyone else accepted as normal. You noticed things others ignored. You felt uneasy in environments where compromise was celebrated. You couldn't fully enjoy conversations that revolved around tearing others down, exaggerating status, or glorifying emptiness. Even when you tried to fit in, something inside you pulled back, not in judgment, in withdrawal. You didn't always know why. You just knew it didn't sit right. Another sign was your sensitivity, not emotional fragility, but depth. You felt things fully. Words stayed with you. Energy affected you. Silence spoke to you. You could walk into a room and sense tension without anyone saying a word. You could tell when someone was being sincere and when they were performing. This sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was perception. But because the world rewards hardness, you were often told to toughen up, to stop overthinking, to be less intense. So you learned to quiet yourself instead of trusting what you sensed. You were also given an unusual relationship with solitude. Loneliness may have hurt you, yes, but solitude never destroyed you. In fact, some of your clearest moments came when you were alone, when noise faded, when expectations loosened, when you could breathe without performing. That's because God often speaks in stillness, not spectacle. And even before you understood him fully, your spirit recognized his frequency. You may have noticed that certain paths never opened for you, even when you tried. Doors closed that looked promising. Relationships ended abruptly without clear explanation. Opportunities slipped through your fingers at the last moment, and for a long time you thought that meant rejection. But in truth, it was redirection. God was quietly blocking access to futures that would have drained your calling before it matured. Another sign was your resistance to false authority. You respected leadership, but you struggled with control. You could sense when power was misused. You could tell when rules were driven by fear rather than wisdom, and even when you obeyed, something inside you remained watchful, not rebellious, aware. You didn't blindly follow voices just because they were loud. You needed alignment, not position. There were also moments of protection you couldn't explain. Times when something told you not to go somewhere, not to trust someone, not to speak yet. And later you realized how close you were to harm. Those weren't instincts alone. That was guidance operating quietly in the background, guarding you before you knew how to guard yourself. You were never fully satisfied with surface-level faith. You wanted depth, understanding, truth that could withstand doubt. You asked questions others avoided. You wrestled internally instead of pretending certainty, and though it made your faith feel complicated at times, it also made it real. God is not threatened by questions. He is threatened only by indifference, and you were never indifferent. Another sign was how suffering shaped you instead of hardening you. Pain did not turn you cruel. Confusion did not make you cynical. Disappointment did not make you numb. You felt it all, but somehow compassion remained intact. You still cared. You still noticed others' pain. You still felt moved by injustice. That is not common. That is refinement. You may have noticed that you couldn't stay asleep forever, even when you tried. Distractions worked for a while. Busyness numbed things temporarily. But eventually, the questions returned. The restlessness resurfaced. Something inside you kept asking for meaning, for alignment, for truth. That wasn't dissatisfaction with life. That was calling pressing gently against containment. There was also this strange pattern where clarity came in fragments. Not all at once. A realization here, a confirmation there, a conversation that lingered longer than it should have, a sentence that stayed with you, a moment that felt heavier than normal. God was preparing you piece by piece, because sudden awakening can overwhelm, gradual illumination strengthens. And here's something important. You didn't seek attention for these things. You didn't announce them. You didn't need recognition. Much of what you carried quietly. That's one of the clearest signs of true calling. It doesn't beg to be seen. It waits to be revealed at the right time. Chosen one, none of these signs made sense on their own. But together, they form a pattern of someone who was never meant to live unaware, unaligned, or asleep. Someone whose spirit resisted numbness even when life was heavy. Someone whose awareness was delayed, not denied. If you're recognizing yourself in these words, don't rush to label it. Let it settle. Awareness is not meant to excite you, it's meant to ground you. God doesn't awaken people to impress them. He awakens them to entrust them. The signs were always there. They weren't meant to elevate you above others. They were meant to prepare you to serve without losing yourself, to walk in truth without becoming hardened, to carry light without needing to prove it. And now that you can see them clearly, something shifts, not outwardly at first, but inwardly. You stop questioning your sanity. You stop minimizing your discernment. You stop apologizing for depth. You realize you weren't late. You were being trained quietly. In the next part, I'm going to expose how the enemy tried to use confusion, busyness, and delay to keep you from recognizing these signs, not to frighten you, but to free you. Because once you understand the tactic, it loses its power over you. How the devil uses confusion, busyness, and delay. Chosen one, now we move into understanding, not fear. I don't want you alert. I want you calm and aware. Because what the enemy used against you was never dramatic enough to alarm you, but subtle enough to wear you down. Darkness doesn't always attack with chaos. Sometimes it whispers with routine. Sometimes it hides behind responsibility. Sometimes it disguises itself as normal life. One of the enemy's oldest tools is confusion. Not loud confusion, quiet confusion. The kind that makes you second-guess your thoughts, your feelings, your timing. Confusion that doesn't scream danger, but slowly erodes confidence. You knew something wasn't right, yet you couldn't explain it clearly. You felt misaligned, but everything around you looked acceptable. And that's the trap. Confusion thrives where nothing looks obviously wrong. The devil doesn't need to convince you of lies if he can keep you uncertain about truth. Uncertainty drains energy. It keeps you circling instead of moving forward. And when you're circling, you feel busy without being aligned, active without being effective. That's exactly where the enemy prefers you. Busyness is another favored weapon, not productivity. Busyness. There is a difference. Productivity moves with purpose. Busyness moves with urgency, and urgency clouds discernment. You were kept occupied with obligations, expectations, emotional labor, and endless tasks. Not all of them were bad, many were good, But good things can still distract you from God's best if they consume your inner stillness. Have you noticed how rest always felt interrupted? How moments of clarity were followed by sudden demands? How every time you slowed down enough to reflect, something pulled you back into motion? That wasn't coincidence. Stillness is dangerous to darkness because it creates space for truth to rise. And truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. The enemy understands timing very well. He knows that he cannot stop God's plan, but he can attempt to delay your recognition of it. Delay works differently than denial. Denial feels final. Delay feels hopeful, but exhausting. It makes you question whether you missed something, whether you waited too long, whether God changed his mind. And those questions slowly weaken trust if left unaddressed. But here is what you must understand clearly now. Delay is not absence. Delay is protection. God delays revelation when premature clarity would damage you more than help you. The enemy tries to twist that delay into discouragement. He wants you to interpret patience as punishment, silence as rejection, waiting as failure. And when you believe those interpretations, you start pushing doors God never assigned you to open. Confusion, busyness, and delay often work together. Confusion keeps you unsure. Busyness keeps you distracted. Delay keeps you doubting. And while you're occupied managing these three, you're too tired to notice that your discernment is being dulled by exhaustion, not deception. Another subtle tactic was emotional overload. You carried more than you should have. Other people's burdens, other people's expectations, other people's chaos. And because you were empathetic, you didn't walk away easily. You absorbed, you endured, you held space. But empathy without boundaries becomes depletion. And depleted people don't hear clearly. They react, they survive, they cope. The enemy never needed to pull you into obvious sin. He only needed to exhaust your spirit enough to silence your intuition. And exhaustion is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It feels like responsibility. It feels like maturity. It feels like being needed. Until one day you realize you haven't listened to yourself in a long time. Delay also showed up in the form of almosts. Almost breakthroughs, almost clarity, almost peace. Things that looked close, but never quite landed. And those moments were painful because they built expectation without resolution. But even there, God was present, protecting you from rushing into alignment without understanding. Because clarity without grounding can become pride, and grounding takes time. You were not meant to rush into your calling. You were meant to grow into it. The enemy rushed you emotionally, hoping panic would replace patience. But patience is not passive. It is disciplined trust. And though you didn't always feel strong, you remained anchored. You didn't abandon faith. You didn't become bitter. You didn't harden your heart. That matters more than you realize. Chosen one, here is the truth that dissolves all fear. Once you recognize a tactic, it loses power over you. Confusion cannot survive clarity. Busyness cannot survive intention. Delay cannot survive trust. You don't need to fight these things aggressively. You simply need to stop internalizing them as personal failure. You were never behind. You were being paced. God was slowing you down so you wouldn't outrun your character. He was quieting you so you wouldn't confuse noise for calling. He was delaying certain doors so you wouldn't mistake access for alignment. The enemy tried to convince you that waiting meant losing, but heaven was using waiting to fortify you. And now, something important has shifted. You are no longer confused by default. You are no longer busy without awareness. You are no longer interpreting delay as abandonment. Understanding has entered the room, and understanding always brings peace with it. This is why I asked you to stay calm, not alert. Alertness creates tension. Awareness creates authority. You don't need to watch the enemy. You need to stay aligned with God. Darkness reacts to light. Light does not react to darkness. In the next part, I'm going to show you why this understanding is arriving now, not earlier. why God waited until this moment to let the truth settle in you fully, and why this timing is not random, but merciful. The moment God decided you'd know the truth. Chosen one, this part is important, so slow your breathing and let your shoulders relax. What you are experiencing now is not sudden. It only feels sudden because you are finally aware of it. God did not wake you up overnight. He prepared you quietly, patiently, and with care. Revelation is not given when we demand it. It is given when we can carry it without losing our balance. God never reveals truth to impress you. He reveals truth to entrust you. There is a moment in every chosen life when restraint lifts, not because danger is gone, but because maturity has arrived. And maturity does not mean you have everything figured out. It means you no longer panic when you don't. It means you've learned how to stay anchored even when answers come slowly. That is why now is different. Earlier in your life, clarity would have overwhelmed you. You might have misunderstood it. You might have weaponized it. You might have tried to prove yourself instead of walking humbly. So God waited, not because you were weak, but because you were still forming. Truth without grounding can inflate the ego or crush the heart. God protects his chosen ones from both. Look back carefully. You'll notice something subtle. The last season refined your emotional reactions. You don't respond the same way you used to. Things that once triggered panic now invite pause. Things that once demanded explanation now receive silence. That is not numbness, that is strength forming. And strength is required before clarity can safely arrive. God waited until your faith no longer depended on constant reassurance, until you could trust him, even when feelings were inconsistent, until obedience no longer needed applause. That's when revelation becomes safe, because it won't be idolized, it will be stewarded. Chosen one, this message found you now because your inner world has changed. You are not seeking identity anymore. You are seeking alignment. You are not asking to be seen. You are asking to be led. That shift matters deeply in the spiritual realm. There was a time when knowing too much would have made you restless. You would have rushed, forced doors, tried to control outcomes. But now, something is different. You've learned that peace is more valuable than speed, that obedience is more powerful than ambition, that silence can be holier than explanation. God reveals truth to those who can hold it without rushing ahead of him. You may wonder why others around you seem unchanged while you are seeing clearly. That's not judgment, it's timing. God works individually. Revelation is personal. And just because someone walks near you doesn't mean they are ready to carry what you're being shown. That's why God didn't announce this moment publicly. He whispered it privately. This is how God operates. Quietly, intentionally, without spectacle. You didn't receive this understanding because you earned it through perfection. You received it because you stayed soft while life was hard. You didn't let disappointment turn into bitterness. You didn't let confusion turn into rebellion. You didn't let delay turn into despair. You kept showing up, even when you didn't know why. That faithfulness created capacity. Capacity matters more than curiosity. Many people want answers, but few are prepared for responsibility. Truth changes how you live, how you speak, how you choose, how you treat people. God waited until your character could support that shift, because revelation without responsibility is dangerous. Chosen one, there is another reason God waited until now. You had to learn the difference between his voice and your emotions. Earlier, your emotions were louder. Pain spoke strongly. Fear interrupted often. But now, your inner world is quieter, not empty, ordered. And in order, God speaks clearly. This is why the timing feels precise. Because it is. God did not bring this message to you when you were desperate. He brought it when you were stable. He didn't reveal truth to pull you out of chaos. He revealed truth because chaos no longer controlled you. That is a powerful distinction. And here is something deeply comforting. God never reveals something and then abandons you to figure it out alone. Revelation comes with guidance. Awareness comes with grace. You are not being exposed to pressure. You are being invited into clarity. You may notice now that your discernment feels calmer, less reactive, more steady. You don't feel the need to convince others. You don't feel rushed to announce anything. That's how you know this awareness is from God. It brings peace, not urgency. It grounds you instead of agitating you. This is also why this message resonates instead of overwhelms. If you were not ready, it would feel heavy, confusing, intimidating. But instead, it feels familiar, like something your spirit already knew but couldn't articulate. That's confirmation. Chosen one, God did not reveal this truth earlier because you still needed to learn humility through limitation, dependence through uncertainty, faith through silence. Those lessons are invisible but essential. Without them, awareness becomes arrogance, and God will never elevate arrogance. Now that the truth is settling, you may feel a strange mix of relief and responsibility. Relief because things finally make sense. Responsibility because you know you can't live the same way anymore. That's normal. Awareness always brings adjustment, but adjustment does not mean pressure. It means alignment. You are not expected to change everything overnight. God doesn't rush obedience. He walks it out with you, step by step, season by season. What He reveals, He sustains. What He entrusts, He supports. Let me say this clearly because you need to hear it. You are not late. You did not miss your window. God's timing is not fragile. Nothing delayed Him. Nothing surprised Him. Nothing slipped through His hands. The same God who restrained revelation is now releasing understanding, and He does not make mistakes. This moment is not about becoming something new. It's about finally recognizing what God has been shaping quietly all along. You don't need to strive for it. You don't need to prove it. You only need to stay aligned with it. And here's the most important part. Awareness does not isolate you. It grounds you. It teaches you when to speak and when to remain silent, when to move and when to wait, when to engage and when to step back. That balance is the mark of spiritual maturity. Chosen one, God decided you would know the truth now because you can carry it without fear, without ego, without losing peace. And that tells me something very important about where you are in your journey. In the next part, I'm going to show you what begins to change once you walk in this light. Not externally at first, but internally. Because when the inside shifts, the outside eventually follows, quietly, naturally, without force. What changes once you walk in the light? Chosen one, when light enters your life, it doesn't arrive like a spotlight. It arrives like order, quiet, steady, unforced. The first thing that changes is not your circumstances. It's your inner posture. You stop bracing yourself for impact. You stop waking up mentally defensive. You stop expecting confusion as the default. And that alone shifts everything. You begin to notice that reactions slow down. Situations that once triggered immediate anxiety now invite discernment. You pause before responding. You listen before speaking. You no longer feel the urge to explain yourself to everyone. Not because you've become distant, but because you've become secure. Security removes the need to perform. Your peace becomes less fragile. Earlier, peace depended on outcomes, on people behaving well, on plans working out. But now, peace is rooted deeper. It's not something you chase. It's something you carry. And because you carry it, you protect it. You don't argue unnecessarily. You don't overcommit. You don't stay in spaces that drain you just to be polite. Light teaches boundaries without bitterness. Another change is clarity in decision-making. You stop overanalyzing everything. You still think deeply, but you no longer spiral. You recognize when something aligns and when it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you don't need 10 reasons to justify stepping back. Discernment speaks clearly, and you trust it. That trust saves you from exhaustion. You also become less impressed by appearances. Loud confidence no longer convinces you. Titles don't move you the way integrity does. Promises don't excite you unless consistency follows them. You've learned that light reveals substance, not shine. And because of that, you choose slower paths that lead to peace rather than faster paths that lead to burnout. One of the most noticeable changes is how conflict affects you. You no longer feel the need to win every argument or correct every misunderstanding. You realize that not everyone needs access to your clarity. Some people are still learning through confusion, and that's okay. Light doesn't chase darkness. It remains steady and lets darkness reveal itself. Your compassion also matures. Earlier, compassion meant absorbing pain, fixing others, carrying burdens that were never yours. But now, compassion includes wisdom. You care without rescuing. You support without sacrificing yourself. You pray without controlling outcomes. That balance is not coldness, it's health. You may notice that certain relationships naturally shift. Some distance grows, some conversations fade, not through conflict, but through misalignment. And instead of panicking about that, you accept it. Light clarifies connections. It shows you who walks with you by assignment and who walked with you by season. Letting go no longer feels like loss. It feels like alignment. Your relationship with God also deepens in a quieter way. You pray with less urgency and more trust. You listen more than you speak. You stop demanding signs and start recognizing patterns. Faith becomes less emotional and more grounded. You trust God even when feelings fluctuate. That stability changes how you walk through uncertainty. Another shift happens in how you view success. You stop measuring progress by speed. You stop comparing timelines. You stop feeling behind when others move faster. You understand now that alignment matters more than arrival, and because of that, you stop rushing what God is still shaping. You also become more selective with your energy. You no longer pour into every request. You ask inwardly before saying yes. You discern whether something is assignment or distraction, and when you say no, you don't carry guilt. You understand that saying no to the wrong thing is obedience, not selfishness. Light also changes how you deal with mistakes. You don't spiral into shame. You don't punish yourself internally. You correct, realign, and move forward. Awareness teaches responsibility without condemnation. You hold yourself accountable without destroying your confidence. That balance keeps you moving forward steadily. Another important change is how you handle silence. Silence no longer scares you. It no longer feels like abandonment. You understand now that silence is often where God works deepest. So you don't rush to fill it with noise. You let it teach you. And in that silence, your discernment sharpens even more. You may notice that fear loses its intensity. It doesn't disappear entirely, but it no longer controls your decisions. You feel fear without obeying it. You acknowledge uncertainty without surrendering peace. Light doesn't remove challenges, it removes panic. And panic was never meant to guide you. Chosen one, this is what walking in the light looks like. Not dramatic transformation overnight, but steady alignment over time. You don't become louder, you become clearer. You don't become harder, you become wiser. You don't become distant, you become grounded. And here's something important. Walking in the light doesn't make life easier. It makes life simpler. You stop complicating things God made clear. You stop forcing doors God closed. You stop chasing validation God never assigned you to seek. That simplicity brings rest. You also stop fearing darkness the way you used to. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer confuses you. Light doesn't fight darkness aggressively. It simply reveals what was hidden. And once revealed, darkness loses its influence. This is why awareness feels peaceful instead of overwhelming. You are not being pushed into something. You are being settled into something. Your life doesn't suddenly change direction. It finally finds direction. And as this settles, you begin to understand something deeply comforting. You don't need to prove who you are. You don't need to announce what you carry. You don't need to defend your pace. Light speaks for itself. In the final part, I'm going to help you seal this understanding, to ground it, to walk away calm, not stimulated. Because this message was never meant to excite you briefly. It was meant to steady you permanently. Conclusion: sealing the message and divine alignment. Chosen one, let everything you've heard now settle gently inside you. There is no rush, no pressure, no urgency chasing you. Darkness did not win. Confusion did not define you. Delay did not cancel you. Everything you walked through served a purpose, and now that purpose is becoming clear. You were never lost. You were being led quietly. The enemy tried to keep you unaware because awareness changes how you walk. But the moment has arrived, and notice how it didn't come with fear. It came with peace. That's how you know this is from God. Truth from heaven steadies the soul. It doesn't agitate it. You don't need to go back and relive your past with regret. You don't need to confront anyone. You don't need to prove anything. What matters is that you see clearly now. And clarity brings responsibility, yes, but it also brings rest. You are no longer searching blindly. You are walking intentionally. From this moment forward, let calm obedience guide you. Let discernment shape your choices. Let peace protect your spirit. You don't need to rush what God is still unfolding. Alignment will open doors at the right time. Always has, always will. Remember this: light doesn't shout. It remains steady. And you were never meant to fight darkness aggressively. You were meant to outgrow it. If this message resonated with you, chosen one, give a like to this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, turn on the bell icon and share this message with other chosen ones who need clarity right now, and comment 777 to declare that you are aligned with God's timing, walking in truth and no longer in the dark. Stay grounded, stay obedient, stay peaceful. More clarity is coming.